Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing Game Plan in the 15-minute pool on ICC. Let's open with e4 against Game Plan. So Game Plan is 1666, and let's play. I think I'll go into an open Sicilian if he lets me. Make it fun. Just checking his stats, and he has a peak 15-minute rating of 1702. 745 wins, 756 losses, lots of games. Okay, so he's playing the Najdorf. I'm going to play the bishop g5 variation. This is my old weapon against the Najdorf. I don't get to use it too often anymore because I don't play e4 much anymore. But this is always my go-to move whenever I face the Najdorf. And I teach it to a lot of my students too. I just like the positions that arise. I think they're very thematic for the Sicilian, and they're a lot of fun to play for both sides. So this is all standard. White intends to put the queen on f3 as I just did, and then castle long. And from there, it will depend whether I want to play bishop d3 or g4. And actually, the move that black chooses here will also dictate my strategy somewhat. Queen c7 being the main move. If they play knight bd7, I have an extra option of going bishop c4 with ideas of bishop takes e6. So that's why queen c7 is considered to be the most accurate here. So he's actually letting me go bishop c4, so this could be interesting. I could just castle and try to transpose back into normal lines, but we have this option, so we should probably take it. We'll see how he responds. So if he plays queen c7, I'm going to go bombs away, and bishop takes e6, because I'll get two pawns right off the bat. Just f takes e6, knight takes e6, and very good chance I would just get the g7 pawn after that because I'd be attacking his queen, he'd have to move it. So knight c5, he might know that I'm trying to sacrifice on e6. Now, I can castle queenside, and it bodes well for me that my rook is lined up with his queen along the d file. So just right off the bat, I really want to play e5 and just break the position open. I'm very tempted to do that. In fact, I think it's going to win material. Because if e5 and he takes it, I have this discovered attack, knight takes e6 at hand. And if e5 he moves the knight, at the very least I can trade bishops and then capture on d6. So this is so thematic, I'm just going to play it without too much thought because like everything in my chess being is screaming to play this move. I have my rook on the same file as his queen, and he hasn't addressed that problem. Yeah, so here I have a discovered attack possibility. And I just want to make sure I choose the right discovery. I think knight takes e6 will be the right discovery because we win a pawn, and then once he moves his queen, because his queen will be double attacked by the knight and the rook, so presumably he has to move it, I can take on f8 next. It may be possible for him to go bishop g4 after that, but I have a real hard time believing in this position for him. You know, I could also play knight c6. Maybe that's even stronger. Knight c6, because then I'm double attacking his queen. And let's say he plays queen c7. Then I can take on e7. He takes with his queen. And then I can take on e5. And he's pinned. Maybe that's even better. I like that. In both cases, knight c6 or knight takes e6, he could sacrifice his queen for a knight and rook, but I would be completely fine with that. Yeah, I think knight c6 might be stronger. Let's do that. It's kind of weird because it seems like the other move is even better. I mean, it's hard to resist knight takes e6 with the idea of going after the rook. But now I just get to do this.
Check.
Once he takes back, I take on e5. He already resigned. So, yeah, that's unfortunate for him. I mean, he probably just didn't quite know the main line in this variation. Knight bd7 didn't do him any favors, but it highlights the importance of, in that position, playing queen c7. So let's just review it. So I did a book review on this book called Modernized, the Open Sicilian. And in that book, they recommend h3 for white as an interesting plan to try to go g4 and leads to some interesting positions, especially ones where white can swamp black on the king side with their pawns. But I decided to play bishop g5 because, as I said, this is my go-to weapon. I've always played this. It's one of the most critical moves against the Najdorf. And then the plan is as follows. You're going to go f4, queen f3, castle long. And I like putting the bishop on d3 thereafter and playing rook he1. But some people prefer to leave the bishop on f1 and play for g4. So f4, bishop e7. If he wanted to, he could play the so-called poison pawn variation in this position and play queen b6. This is a Fischer and Kasparov favorite. It leads to really sharp lines where black neglects their development for now, but tries to go after this pawn on b2. And here, the main line is queen d2, and then queen takes b2. And here white can choose between knight b3 or rook b1. And there's just an absolute massive theory devoted to this line, where black has always seemed to hold their own, despite white getting a lot of play for the single pawn. So that's one of the most important battlegrounds in the bishop g5 variation of the Najdorf. But the line he chose is also critical. Bishop e7, queen f3. Bishop e7 is important because white may have it in them to play e5. There is a line called the Polygaevsky variation where black actually says, go ahead, play e5, I don't care, and plays b5 himself. Really audacious move. Interesting line there, by the way. e5, if white takes black up on their offer. e5, d takes e5, f takes e5, and now queen c7 is the idea. After e takes f6, black can go
check.
Queen e5 check, winning back a piece because of the fork. Now, in this position, bishop e2 has been the main move. But I remember seeing an old article, I think it was in Chess Life, I'm talking like 10 plus years ago, where the move knight e4 was analyzed. And I've always thought this was interesting, and I've actually played it in a couple games, where you give up the knight on
check.
e4 rather than giving up the bishop, and then you go knight e2. You preserve this bishop on g5, because the threat is to take on g7, and after they take with their bishop, you can mate them on d8. Of course, that's probably not going to happen, but I distinctly remember one game I played when I was probably about 2000, where my opponent went knight d7, I took on g7, he took with his bishop, I played queen d6, threatening mate, he played bishop f8, I went queen d2, and I castled long, and I had a really good game. Black's king was caught in the center. So that's kind of neither here nor there, but just trying to clue you in into some possible lines that are available for black after f4. So bishop e7 is by far the main move, but there's also that queen b6 poison pawn variation and b5 the Polygaevsky variation, both of which are fraught with risk for both sides if they don't know their stuff. But bishop e7 and now queen f3, and he really should play queen c7. And then after castles, then play knight bd7, because queen c7 on the previous move rules out bishop c4. So yeah, it's just a known move order mistake to go knight bd7 first because of this move. And if he, as I had mentioned, if he had done this now, I would take on e6, and I would immediately get 2 pawns for the piece. And because I'm attacking his queen, let's say queen a5, I can take on g7, and I have 3 pawns plus a ongoing initiative. In fact, I've seen this exact position before, and it never really ends well for black. One thing I should also mention about this line, some players, it's becoming trendy to try to do a couple different things. One thing that players have tried to do is delay the development of this bishop. So occasionally you'll see people playing queen c7 or knight bd7 here. It's interesting. And now it's becoming popular to even play knight bd7 and delay moving the pawn. So not even pushing the pawn to e6. And then after f4, playing, for instance, I think queen a5 is a move in this position, or queen c7. I always forget exactly which move it is. But trying to obtain like typical Najdorf counterplay, but without delving into the main lines. So that's quite interesting. I am definitely most familiar with the lines that go like this, though. So after he did play knight bd7, I played bishop c4, knight c5, and then castles. I'm guessing the only way he can really justify his play now is to play queen c7. That's probably the only reasonable move, because that holds up e5 and it gets his queen off of the d file. That said, it's still very scary for him. I mean, even simple moves like rook he1 are available, and I'm fully coordinated, and I don't get that same impression about his position. You know, oftentimes black is behind in development in the Najdorf, but when he's already committed a move order mistake like this, it can compound his development issues. Like now again, I'm threatening e5, and it's going to be painful unless he does something drastic. Let's just see what the engine has to say. The engine's likes white. It's not incredibly impressed, I guess, but I don't know. I wasn't expecting like +2 or something, but yeah, it likes rook he1 in this position. Let's see if it thinks queen c7 is the best move. Yeah, queen c7, queen b6. Got to get the queen off the d file. After castles, this becomes a big problem for him. It's interesting that it claims I should take on f6 first. Wasn't really thrilled to give up my dark square bishop for their knight quite yet. So if bishop takes, now I can go e5, and that's similar. If take, here I probably would take on e6 and go after their rook. Yeah. If take on f6, I wonder if he would have to take with the g-pawn to avoid that. And now b4 is good. Not a move I would have thought about, probably. Why is that? So if here is bishop takes e6, just painful for black? Pretty much looks like it. Yeah, if take, knight takes, hitting the queen, also threatening stuff like queen g4, queen g7. Queen e8, knight here. Yeah, this is, I'm sure this is good for white, just winning the rook in the corner. But I like my solution better, I think. It's more straightforward, e5. And knight e8 must be played to avoid a disaster for him. Okay, makes sense. If he gives me any more open lines to work with, it's going to get messy for him, as it did in the game. I was thinking if knight e8 to play h4. This is sometimes an idea, just prop up the bishop on g5, hoping that they take and give you an open avenue towards their king. As you can see, black is busted here too. So yeah, e5 and take, and let's see if I made the right call. According to the engine, yes. Because initially I was ready to play this move, and it's also a good move, but let's say he plays, I don't know, queen b6, and then I take on f8. Just wasn't sure about bishop g4 in between move. Computer says, don't worry about it, just do this, but again, kind of complicated. I might very well find that move if I found myself in this position, but knight c6 just seems so much easier. It does virtually the same thing, attacking the queen twice, but I get to get his bishop, which in turn allows me to pin him if he had proceeded. So yeah, he resigned after knight takes e7, but if he had played on queen takes e7, take, he's not getting out of that pin, and it's over. I take that knight, and his king is flapping in the wind, open to the elements. Occasionally you can do like h6, bishop h4, g5, but not when I can take his knight with tempo. I don't even have to save my bishop yet. So short game, but I hope that illustrates the danger black faces in some of these very sharp lines in the Sicilian. The Najdorf is one variation that if you're going to play it in your over-the-board games or in your longer games, you really got to know your stuff in the key lines. And move orders are extremely important because pretty much any mainline Sicilian you go into, you'll be behind in development as black. So the importance of getting your move orders right is paramount, basically. And this just happens to be a sharp line, you know, bishop g5 on move 6, where if black gets the move order wrong, they get in trouble quick. So hope you guys enjoyed that one. I'll be back tomorrow with another 15-minute game. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.